Biologists employ genetics to populations using a formula made by mathematician Godfrey Hardy and physician Wilhelm Weinberg, called the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, which in its simplest form is broken down into two formulas. The purpose of the first formula is to look at the frequency of dominant and recessive alleles in a population. So P refers to the frequency of dominant alleles in a population, and Q is the frequency of recessive alleles in a population, and 1 just simply refers to a whole population. The second formula refers to the genotype frequency of those who are homozygous dominant, represented by P square, heterozygous, represented by the section 2pq, and homozygous recessive, represented by the q square. They stated that as long as evolution is not occurring...
Oh my gosh. Anyway.
They stated that as long as evolution is not occurring, the frequencies of alleles and genotypes would remain the same within a population. However, if evolution is occurring, we should see a change in these frequencies each generation due to the following mechanisms of evolution: natural selection, mutation, genetic drift, and gene flow. So let's start with mutation. Mutations are the only way new alleles can be made. This occurs when a mistake happens in the replication and transcription of DNA. If the mistake is not fixed, mutations can either cause no change to the organism, phenotypically, potentially be fatal to the organism, or it may produce a beneficial phenotype. Natural selection occurs as individuals with certain heritable traits tend to produce more offspring than individuals without those traits, often leading to a change in the genetic makeup of a species. Selection factors that affect populations include predator-prey relations and environmental factors such as sudden changes in a landscape or abrupt and permanent temperature changes. Mutations propose new alleles. Natural selection will decide if those alleles will remain due to being beneficial or hinder the organism. If a mutation is beneficial to an individual and they successfully reproduce and their offspring are subsequently successful, it is likely that that phenotype will become more common in the species, leading to an adaptation. Mutations simply introduce new alleles. Natural selection sorts out which alleles work and which ones don't. However, sometimes it happens. Sometimes the phenotypic makeup of a population is just due to chance events that affected their ancestors in the past. Genetic drift has larger effects on smaller populations since smaller populations have less genetic diversity. For example...
Oh crap, I can't find the mute button. Hold on.
If a population of 100 organisms occurs and a chance event happens to kill off one of them, only 1% of the gene pool was affected. But if only 10 members of the population exist and one member dies off, that's 10% of the gene pool that is now gone. So genetic drift is different from natural selection because the chance event does not discriminate based on genetic phenotypes. That is, anyone can be a target. Fur seals were almost hunted to extinction and had a variety of coat colors. Fur seals were actually hunted for their blubber and thus coat color. So that really didn't matter, the color of their coat. And because the vast majority of seals were harvested, it reduced the gene pool so that the descendants of those fur seals are limited to the genes of the survivors, reducing genetic diversity. And this is often a huge hurdle in protecting endangered species because not only are the numbers so low, but the gene diversity is also severely limited, which increases the chance of genetic disorders in that group. Genetic drift can be divided into two categories: bottleneck effect and founder effect. The fur seal example was an example of a bottleneck effect. Another might be a forest fire that takes out a chunk of a box turtle population. Eastern box turtles have a variety of patterns on their shells to help them blend into their environment. However, a wildfire just doesn't care. Turtles that just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time are going to be affected by this. Bottleneck effect is called such as it is a metaphor with a bottle filled with marbles. Each marble represents an individual in a population. Open it, shake the bottle a few times, and a few of those marbles will escape the bottleneck. The bottleneck represents the chance event. In the case of the turtles, a forest fire. Those who made it out are the surviving population. You will notice in this scenario that there are alleles represented by green is not seen in the survivors. Unless this allele is carried by the surviving population, that allele is now extinct in that population. However, the allele represented by green could have easily been killed off in that same chance event. The other type of genetic drift is founder effect, and this occurs when a member of a large population breaks off and forms their own population, or if two populations become separated by a physical barrier. Polydactylism, a condition where one is born with more than 5 fingers or toes per hand or foot, is more commonly seen in the Amish community in the United States versus the American population writ large. And this is due to the fact that a small segment of an Amish community in Germany settled in the United States with at least one member having polydactylism. And since Amish tend to intermarry within their groups, polydactylism appears more often. Founder effect is also a problem in zoos and aquariums in the past because they are used for breeding endangered species. If a lion exhibit is limited to 1 male and 3 females, that pride's future is solely based on the genetics of that pride. Zoos and aquariums overcome founder effect by exchanging individuals between zoos to help increase genetic diversity, especially in endangered species. Gene flow refers to the movement of alleles from one population to another. This is also referred to as immigration and emigration. Now, I emphasize the E in emigration since both words technically sound the same. Immigration is when new individuals enter a population, thus adding their genes to the gene pool, while emigration is when individuals leave a population, taking their genes out of the gene pool. And if a population is large and stable, gene flow really has no effect on it. But in the case of certain species, such as many plants, they can send pollen and seeds far and wide, introducing new genes into a population of the same species where those same alleles are rare. So now that we know the mechanisms for evolution in a population, such as mutation, which introduces new alleles, and natural selection, genetic drift, and gene flow, which simply rearrange existing alleles in a population, how do you get new species? So in our next video, we're going to explore macroevolution by going over speciation.